Good morning. Welcome to Trinity Episcopal Parish's class over how to use the Book of Common Prayer. Over the past couple of weeks, we've started to get into the table of contents. We find ourselves, after talking about the calendar, like we did last week, talking about one of the largest sections in the Book of Common Prayer, which is called the Daily Office. The daily office, very simply, means the daily round of prayer. The word office comes from a Latin word officium, which means work. It means that it is a daily work of prayer. How exactly do we get into daily prayer in the daily office? Now, if you have your Book of Common Prayer in front of you, you might have turned to the section of the daily office that begins with, of course, the big words daily office, and you'll see in front of you things like Rite 1, morning prayer, or something along those lines. We're not going to start there, though. The reason why is because the larger services of the daily office are going to be the morning prayer and evening prayer sections of Rite 1 and Rite 2. If you're just starting out, those can be very complicated. Those can seem very difficult to get into. And especially if you're someone who is new to using the Book of Common Prayer on a regular basis, the attempt to try to bite off more than you can chew can be quite frustrating sometimes, especially when you're trying to facilitate a daily prayer. Rather, what we're going to do first is we're going to talk about training wheels, so to speak. In order to start any new habit, we have to develop within ourselves a particular stance, interior stance, in order to get into the rhythm of daily prayer. Because after all, daily prayer is a rhythm. It's something that you get into. It's something that after you start moving along to the ebbs and flows of this particular way of structuring your prayer, you will fall into it naturally. Your body will expect you to be at prayer at certain times during the day. But we don't get there just right at the outset. We have to build in that discipline. We have to build in that habit in a way that can naturally grow. The approach we're going to be taking as it comes to using the book is going to be a growth model. It has to start small and get bigger and grow after that. And so because of that, if you'll look at your table of contents in the Book of Common Prayer, let's just look at the daily office. And I want to show you something. Because in the daily office, there are a bunch of subcategories, right? So if you look at the daily office, you'll see daily morning prayer, daily evening prayer, daily morning prayer, Rite 2, Noonday Prayer, order of worship in the evening, daily evening prayer, Rite 2, Compline, daily devotionals, table of suggested canticles. It can all seem very dense, very complicated, and in some cases, demotivating if you're just starting out. What we are going to look at this morning, however, is going to be the daily devotionals for individuals and families on page 137. This is where we start our habit. So go ahead and turn to page 137. Daily devotionals for individuals and families is specifically designed to be what you can describe as the lowest common denominator for all of the prayer services in the daily office that you can find in the Book of Common Prayer. We'll talk about why that is in just a minute. But first, you'll notice that there is a little preface right here that will tell you what is going on with the daily devotions for individuals and families. And the editors of the Book of Common Prayer make really clear that these daily devotionals are meant to be used as a way for individuals who have a regular work schedule, who have never had a daily prayer schedule, and it's meant to be used by families together. As the parent of young children, they only have a certain amount of attention. They only have a certain amount of ability to sit still for a bit. And these daily devotionals are an excellent way to start training in them the ability to stop, the ability to listen, and the ability to memorize. So let's just take a look at what the preface says. Notice the very first line of this preface before these little daily devotionals says, "These devotions follow the basic structure of the daily office of the church." In other words, it's the daily office except briefer, in a shorter format. Now, here's why these are important. When you start learning anything, whether it be a trade, whether it be a craft, whether it be a hobby, whether it be a sport, you never start with the complicated stuff. You start with the basics. The daily devotionals for individuals and families is not meant to be something that you do at the minimum. It's something that you use as training to be able to set and teach your own self into the prayer habit of the church. These are your training wheels, so to speak. And because these are your training wheels, we're going to take an overview and then a specific look at them as to why they're important. There are 4 particular sections for daily devotionals. One on page 137 is in the morning, when you get up out of bed. Another one is at noon, normally when we take our lunch times. The third is in the early evening. This is when the sun has either begun to set or is low in the sky or is setting, and at the close of day on page 140. In other words, when the day is done, or even as some might describe this as bedtime prayers. There are 4 particular sections of the daily devotions for individuals and families. These 4 time periods are things that you must make a decision to schedule. Even if you only do one of them, in order to form a habit, you have to make a plan. So if you're going to do, let's say, the in the morning, if you're going to start a daily devotion for in the morning according to the prayer of the church, make a plan. Set a time, set a space, and make a plan to do it. And then keep it. Follow through with it, even if it doesn't feel particularly holy every day. The daily office, the daily prayer of the church, is not going to always feel particularly holy. Some days it is going to seem the most mundane thing you can do. Some days it's going to seem like you don't have anything to talk to God about. That's okay. Sometimes it's like that. The point is, though, don't stop. You have to form that habit. If you're going to do the daily office at a specific point in time during the day, make a plan. What does your plan need to look like? Here are the considerations you need to think about when you're making your daily plan. Where am I going to do it? This might seem like a silly question of where am I going to do it, but it's really important to put yourself into an environment where you are going to be able to pray. Do not do this on the couch in front of the TV. There are too many things to distract you. That space that you sit on the couch in front of the TV or sit in the particular lounge room or something, there are things that you do in those rooms that are going to provide distractions, especially screens, which is why suggestion number 2, when you do these, at the very least, do it in a place that does not have TVs or any sound that's going on. Don't do this with music going on. Don't do this where you can hear music going on. If you're in a house with kids, it's simply going to be a distraction for kids to be running around and things like that. But just find a space that is set aside that you're not going to be immediately distracted. It's kind of self-sabotage to try to set a daily habit in the most complicated place that you could possibly put it. So again, find a place where you can say your daily prayers. But number 2, set a time to say your daily prayers and hold to that time. Our ability to form habits really is built into the rhythm of how our body will function. If you hold yourself to a time of daily prayer and you set it in stone, so to speak, when you start doing your daily practice, that will train your body that something happens at this point in time during the day. We form these habits all the time. The easiest thing to think about is when we have our meal rituals, so to speak. There's always a point in time of the day where your body is going to tell you, hey, I'm a little hungry. It's about lunchtime. It's about dinner time. Your body is trained to the hours when you normally have your meal times. And that varies from person to person. But again, find a space. Don't have any distractions around you. Number 2, find a time and stick to it. But number 3, and this is something that I give you permission to do, only start with one of these. Get to where you can get solid and grounded with one of these offices. This is an excellent opportunity to start a prayer practice as we are approaching Lent. Instead of giving something up for Lent, perhaps give your time over to God and take up a discipline for Lent of saying the daily devotionals. Say one of them and say it regularly, every day, same time. Make a plan and stick to that plan. Now that we've talked about the overview of what is our approach to these things, let's look at them specifically. Let's start with in the morning. You will notice a particular structure to all of these daily devotionals as we go through them. But for in the morning, on page 137, you start with Psalm 51, or a portion of Psalm 51, the verses that are towards the end of Psalm 51, where you will say a portion of a psalm. Then you will get to a reading. This reading is from 1 Peter. Then notice what the instructions for you are in the little italicized words. These italicized words are called rubrics. They are indications as to what can, may, or must follow next. Please note whether it says something must happen or something may happen. Anything that says it may happen does not necessarily have to, but it is a good suggestion for it to occur at this point. A period of silence may follow, is the next instruction. Take that silence. Let yourself be silent. The daily office is not all about us talking. It's about us listening to God. Take that silence. A hymn or canticle may be used. The Apostles' Creed may be said. For you who are just starting out, don't worry about adding anything in yet. Just follow what the particular text is saying. So if you're brand new, don't worry about this just yet, but we'll get to that in just a moment. Then the next one, prayers may be offered for ourselves and others. If you're just starting out, take 30 seconds to allow yourself to pray for others or for something specific in your life. Make it specific. God cares about the details of your life. Nothing about what you're doing is hidden to God. God desires to have that back and forth, that conversation with you. Allow yourself to talk to God about these things in requests, and do that for about 30 seconds. Then, the Lord's Prayer. If you don't know the Lord's Prayer, don't worry. The Lord's Prayer is all over the place in the Book of Common Prayer. In fact, if you flip back just a few pages to page 132, you'll find the Lord's Prayer at the bottom of the page of the Compline service. So if you don't know it by heart, flip back to 132 and then read through the Lord's Prayer as you pray. So it's right there. And then the collect. Now, we say the word collect very interestingly. It looks like we should be saying the word collect. But the word collect is a summary offering of the silent prayers of the faithful. This is why your silence is important and why your personal prayer with God is important in this service. You are offering these prayers to God in this final prayer that will end the morning office, the morning daily devotion. Notice how it goes. We say a psalm. We have a reading. Period of silence. Hymn or canticle or a creed. Prayers for ourselves and others. The Lord's Prayer. The ending collect. This is the exact structure of all of the rest of the daily devotionals. The reason why you need to start with one and get where you get into the flow of everything, get to where it becomes natural for you to go psalm, then reading, then silence, and so on and so forth, is to train your body for the rhythm. Once you are in that rhythm, then expand into other hours of the day. Allow yourself to get used to one first, and then build forward. An easy one to add, especially if you have a lunch break wherever you may work, is the Noonday Prayer. Because guess what? The Noonday Prayer follows the same structure. Psalm, reading, prayers for ourselves, Lord's Prayer, collect. In the early evening can also be an easy one to add if you do this right before you start getting ready for dinner. Now, in the early evening, this will vary depending on what your meal plans are for the evening time period. I personally find it easier for me to pray before I start getting dinner ready. When I start getting dinner ready, my body is telling me it's time to eat some food. Whenever I get done with making dinner, getting all the kids at the dinner table, getting them fed, cleaning up after dinner, putting the kids to bed, it's already late in the evening. If you are like me and are a young parent, I highly suggest do your early evening devotions before you start getting ready for dinner, before you start preparing the meal. For you who have flexible plans in the evening, I highly suggest you do prayers at the closest point to where the sun is going to set. Because one of the hymns in here, one of the canticles, the O Gracious Light, is particularly important to be set during the setting of the sun. In fact, the hymn even says, "Now as we come to the setting of the sun." It is thematically powerful to be able to say these in such a way that it actually matches up with the time period in which you say them. This is not always something that can be ideally done, but for you who have the ability, I highly suggest to do this. And then, at the close of day, bedtime prayers. This is a prayer that I would highly suggest that you say prior to where you begin your bedtime routine. This is something that you can actually say immediately prior to retiring for the evening. This is a little bit easier of a thing to do if you're a parent. The at the close of day is a lot easier to pray because all the kids are in bed. You're not having to deal with all of everybody running around and distractions. The close of day prayers and the morning prayers, if you get up before your kids get up in the morning, are the easiest ones to say as a parent. Noonday and the early evening are going to be the hardest because it's going to be when the kids are up. So again, think about your situation. Think about where are the times in which I can put these after you've started with one, and then expand slowly. give yourself some grace in this. It takes time to learn these. But now we're going to come to an important point that I want to make. These prayers are very simple, and these prayers are going to be ones that sooner or later you will find yourself maybe not needing to look at the book the whole time. This is one of the reasons why you need to take two approaches when you say these things. You need to, number one, always say these things out loud. Always say the collects out loud. Always say the psalms out loud. Always say the readings out loud. Say things with your mouth. Because the way that we memorize things often is both an auditory and also a sight-based exercise. When you say something, when you speak something, and even more particularly if you sing something, you are training yourself in a certain pattern. When you start being able to say these daily devotionals without looking at the book, that's when you know you're making really good progress. You're making good progress to where if you can sit down and say your daily devotions by your memory because you've done it enough, that's the point of the prayer of the church, is for it to get into your bones, so to speak, to be part of yourself, to, in some ways, be able to pray without ceasing, not having to have something in front of you. That's part of why it's important to do this every time you sit down every day. When you make a plan, stick to it. These are your training wheels, and this is why these are your training wheels. Go back to the table of contents at the very beginning of the book. The daily devotions are meant to be ways in which we can follow the daily office for who? Individuals and families. The deeper, more full experience of the prayer of the church matches up with these particular hours. Remember, we talked about it. It's in the morning, at noon, early evening, at the close of day. Guess what? Morning prayer. The full service of morning prayer is what the devotion for in the morning is patterned after. And guess what? Noonday prayer, the full noonday prayer, is what the noonday devotion is based off of. Evening prayer is what the early evening devotion is based off of. And the at the close of day prayers is what Compline is based on, is more fully expressing. The daily devotions, especially for you who have not had a prayer practice before, are the things you need to start with. You must start basically. You must start small and then build up slowly. Don't try to bite all of it off with one big chunk. It is too big and too complicated for that to happen. This is especially the case if you come from a tradition that does not have set prayers to begin with. It is going to take a while for you to get used to the way that you pray. And because it's going to take a while, take some grace and mercy with yourself. Whenever you flip-flop the order for some reason, if you accidentally say the Lord's Prayer before you say the reading for the day, if you accidentally say the collect and you forget the Lord's Prayer one time, just take some grace, laugh at yourself a little bit. That's what I do, is I just laugh at myself a little bit, and then just continue on with your practice. Say you have a day that you're particularly distracted by something. We all have distractions in our lives, and you find your mind wandering during your prayer time. Don't beat yourself up about that. When you notice that your mind is being distracted and looking elsewhere, calm your mind, take a moment, come back into your prayer. Even sometimes just say to God, sorry about that, I got distracted, but I'm back. And then continue on. Allow the prayer to build up in yourself the observance of the time you spend with God. Prayer is about time with God. Prayer is about speaking with God and God speaking to you. And in the training wheels of the daily devotions, let that habit be set in your spirit. That daily rhythm become part of your bodily rhythm. And then once you expand into the fuller observance of the offices, daily morning prayer, noonday, evening prayer, compline, you will have that rhythm down. And then you will be ready for more full observance of the office. Thank you for joining us this morning in our guide to using the Book of Common Prayer. Next time, we will talk specifically about the major offices of the church: morning prayer, noonday prayer, evening prayer, and compline. As we move throughout these, keep in mind, this is meant for you to be able to use in building your daily observance of prayer. And it's meant for you to be able to use the Book of Common Prayer and be able to use it in an effective manner for your growth in Christ. Until next time, friends, be safe and may God bless you.